Have you ever been out to take landscape photos and thought, oh, this sky is a little bit dull? Little bit dull. Or maybe you wish it was sunset, but there's no way for you to be in that location at sunset. Well, no worries, because today we're going to be talking about changing the sky in Photoshop. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where every single Tuesday, you get a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. Now this week, we're diving into Photoshop. We're talking about changing out skies. You know, whether you've got a really dull, grey, overcast sky and you want to put something dramatic in, or you want to put a sunset in, anything. You know, no worries. We're going to talk about how to change it out. We're going to talk about how to then kind of colour match various things in the image so that it all looks not too fake and stuff like that. We're going to talk about all kinds of things, layer masks, colour balancing. There's a lot to cover here, so we're going to move relatively fast. It's going to be a relatively fast one in terms of keeping up, so by all means, if there's any questions throughout this, pop them down in the comments, because I appreciate this is going to be quite a lot to take in. So with that said, let's dive right into Photoshop. Now I've got this image here, which actually I think is a perfectly nice image. I actually really like it, you know. It was actually quite difficult to get to this location. I had to climb across a whole bunch of stuff and walk across rocks and all kinds of stuff, which is why there's no one in the image, which is really nice. I really liked it. I'd love to do this a kind of sunset or sunrise. Either would look good, I think. But in this situation, it wasn't a totally boring sky, but let's say we want to switch this out for something a little bit more interesting. Well, that is absolutely no worries. That's what we're going to do today. So you can see I've got my layer here. I've literally just imported this into Photoshop now. So let's go ahead and click that to unlock it and just make it a normal layer. We're going to go ahead and select the sky. The very first thing we need to do is mask out the sky that's already in the image. And this is probably a little bit easier than you think, so no worries. What we're going to do this time, we're going to come up here to the left, the top left, and click the lasso tool. We're going to make a little selection, a little rough selection around the sky. Now don't worry if you go a little bit off, just make sure to keep it around the sky. You can include a little bit of the landscape around there. We're just going to make a quick selection. There we go. Lovely. We're going to come up here to select at the top and down to color range. Now, if you've seen our how to add birds to any photo video, you'll probably be familiar with this, but if not, no worries. This opens up this little window where we've got a few options, and you can see there's a little kind of preview of the image there, but in black and white. Now, the white is showing us what we're going to be selecting by selecting different colors. The black is what's not going to be selected once we press OK. And essentially what we've done here is we've got our selection that we've made with the lasso tool, and now we are making a new selection within that selection. So you're not going to be affecting any other part of the image, hence why you can only see that top bit of the image there. Now with the eyedropper tool selected, we're going to go ahead and pick part of the sky, and you can see that black and white image changes. Now, because there's actually quite a few colors in the sky, you can see that is actually quite a lot of the sky is not selected there. So we're going to go over here to the Add to Sample eyedropper tool, and we're just going to start clicking around, you know, to the different colors to really try and get all those different shades included until that sky, basically like this, just goes white. Now we've got this fuzziness slider here as well. You can see as I drag that up or back down, it's essentially showing how soft, how much of a feather, how soft and how hard our selection is going to be. We're going to keep it around 50. I think it was actually at 49. I think I'm probably going to keep it at that. We are going to be selecting a little bit of the sea, but that's fine. We can come in and just refine that in a moment. Let's go ahead and press OK, and you can see that has now snapped on, and it is selecting the sky itself. We can now go down here using Alt and the scroll on the map. We can actually zoom in to where the sea is, and you can see, yes, we have selected a little of the sea. So come up here to Select and Mask, and we can go ahead and actually get rid of this. We can hold with the quick selection tool selected in the top left, we can go ahead and press Alt and just sort of click and drag over this. It's going to deselect this sea, and any kind of issues you get there, we can just go ahead and just let go of Alt, and we can just essentially paint that back in. Now I'm going to go ahead and press OK. and we've got that sky selected. Now, that's actually a little bit more of an involved way of doing it. We could actually have done something slightly different. We could have just used the quick select tool to select the sky in this instance. However, that's not going to work all the time. If you've got trees, if you've got anything in the image that's kind of sticking out, you're going to have an issue with the quick select tool, because it's going to be more difficult to get those trees. Using the color range kind of selection is a really clean way of doing this. So that's why I tend to do it. Admittedly, like I say, on this photo it would have worked fine, but it's a good thing to get into the habit of, because then you know what you're going to do when you've got the issue with trees and stuff like that. Now, with that sky selected, we're not going to delete it, because we don't want to actually be we don't want to be destructive with our workflow. So we're actually going to just mask it out. So we can come down here to the bottom right and click the layer mask button. That's going to create a layer mask. Now you can see that's actually masked out the landscape rather than the sky. That's no problem. We can just come up here to invert, and that's going to invert it round the other way. Now, layer masks are probably something that could totally do with their own video, because they are such a powerful way of editing in Photoshop. There's so much you can do with them. It is absolutely crazy how much you can do with a layer mask. It essentially allows you to determine what part of an image you want things applied to. So whether that's going to be painting on a gradient, so applying a gradient to the whole image, but then using a layer mask to select what bits of the image it's going to apply, using different adjustments, so brightness, contrast, things like that, but then painting that on locally into the image. All kinds of things. We'll probably go over that at some point in more detail in a singular video. But for now, you can see here on the layer, we've got the preview image of this layer, and then we have the layer mask next to it. Now, similar to what we were just looking at with the color range selector, anything in white is going to be visible. Anything in black is masked out. So we can actually, with the layer mask selected, you know, you could come up here to the brush tool, you could select black as your color, and you could literally just start painting out part of the landscape if you wanted to. Control Z to undo. Obviously we're not going to do that, but you can see how powerful that is. So we've now got this this sky that is now gone, which is very nice. I'm going to go in and bring in the new sky. So this can be any other photo that you've got with a sky that you want to apply onto your photo. I've actually gone ahead and opened this photo here in Photoshop, and I'm actually going to just click on this layer, Control C, come back over to my original work here, and Control V to add the actual layer there. You can see it's coming in as layer 1. So we've now currently got it above. I'm just going to click and drag that below, and you can see that's already done a pretty good job of just putting that sky in there. It does look a little bit fake because of the way the colors are and things like that, but don't worry, we're going to get to that. Now, the first thing I want to do is I can move this around a little bit if I want to, using the move tool. I just want to make sure I get that in the right position. I'm actually gonna switch it. I'm gonna flip it horizontally, because I want the bright part of that sky to be over on the right-hand side of the image. So I'm gonna press Control T, which is going to allow me to essentially transform this layer. I can make it bigger, I can make it smaller, but for now I just want to flip it. So I'm going to right-click on the actual image. I'm going to click Flip Horizontal, and now you can see the sun is over on the right-hand side. So I'm going to click the tick up there, and I'm going to go ahead and move this just to the kind of right position I want it to be. I think that's actually about what I want. Maybe I'll move it over a little bit. I quite like that. I want to essentially give the impression the sun is setting over on the right. Well, that's it really. I basically want to give the impression the sun is setting over on the right. So let's go ahead and pop that down there. Now, here's where there's a bit more work to do. Now, we've actually done the bulk of the sky replacement itself. I think that's actually looking really good already. I like this new sky, but we've got a few issues to clean up before we get into actually color balancing and all that sort of stuff. If I come over here, Alt and use the scroll wheel to actually zoom in, and you can see there's this edge kind of around this landscape. If I use the space bar and hold that and left click, I can actually drag around the image. You can see that's there. It's not so obvious down here because we've actually got a bright sky behind, but that's something we're going to need to clean up. Now, there's a few different ways we can do this. I'm actually going to go ahead now and right click on this layer and duplicate it so that we've got a backup if we want it. I'm then going to hide that. The main way that I usually do this is actually to to essentially darken those areas around the edge of the landscape. I find that works incredibly well. I find that it looks really good, and it's a very easy and quick way of doing things. Is it the best way of doing things? I don't know. It's not exactly non-destructive, which is not ideal, but as long as we've got a backup copy of that layer there, we're not going to have too many problems. So yet again, I'm going to zoom in over here, and I'm going to come down with my layer there selected, the copy of the layer. I'm going to come over here to this tool here, which looks a little bit like a magnifying glass, I always think. I'm going to left click on it. I'm going to use the burn tool, which looks a bit like a hand there. I'm going to come up here to the range, and this is essentially telling Photoshop what we want to be affecting, shadows, midtones, or highlights. And I'm going to select highlights. Now what the burn tool is going to do, if you've watched our dodging and burning video, you're probably a little bit familiar with that. That was in Lightroom. We're doing it now in Photoshop, and we're also doing it a little bit differently. So we'll probably do a full dodging and burning in Photoshop tutorial at some point. However, for the purposes of this, I'm going to be selecting the range of the highlights. I've got my exposure up. I'm going to have probably about 50%, 48%, that's fine. And I'm just going to reduce the size of this brush, so you can hold Alt on the keyboard, right click and hold and drag left and right to increase and decrease the size of your brush there. And I'm just going to paint in over the edge of the landscape there. And you can see, if I zoom in a bit, you can see that is having quite an effect on those little bits there that are kind of standing out as an edge. If you're finding it's not doing enough of a job or it's taking too long, you can always up the exposure a little bit. So let's go to 60, 67%, 65%. Right, with that done, I can actually go in and start to color balance this image, because of course that sky is very different. So that means the light is very different, and all the colors, all the kind of look of this image is based on how the light was at the time, of course. Whereas with the light being different now, because we've changed out the sky, we need to affect the actual landscape to kind of reflect that a little bit. Speaking of reflections, we will get onto the water in just a moment, so don't worry about that. So first things first, I want to go ahead and create a new adjustment layer. So you can come down here to the bottom right, and you can click on this little icon here, which allows us to create a new adjustment layer. We're going to go ahead and select color balance. Now, this is going to allow us to actually change the kind of colors within things like the midtones and the shadows and the highlights to really kind of balance this out a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and hold Alt and click the little kind of, basically the space between this color balance layer and the layer of the actual landscape. That's going to, as I've done that now, you can see it's actually put this little arrow here. That's actually going to essentially only be affecting that layer just beneath it, which means we're not affecting the sky, which is key really, because we don't want to be affecting the sky too much. We really want to just be affecting this foreground so that we can actually make it match with the sky. So let's go ahead and adjust some of this. So with the shadows, let's go ahead to the shadows here in this little drop down. Let's pop a little bit of blue in there. So we can just pull this slider towards the blue end. The magenta to green, I'm probably going to leave alone, and maybe -2, so just towards the magenta. Let's come up to the highlights, where I'm going to move this a little bit towards the red. Let's see what it looks like with the yellow as well. And with the midtones, let's just pop a tiny bit of blue in there as well to kind of mimic the sky a little bit. Now, I think the actual image itself is probably a little bit too saturated overall, including with the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and bring a new adjustment layer, hue saturation, in here. I'm going to leave this to affect everything, and I'm just going to bring that saturation down a little bit. I'm also going to just bring the magentas down in saturation a little bit, just because the whole image was starting to feel a little bit aggressively magenta. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to bring a new solid color layer in there. I'm going to make it just 50% gray. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay. And that means that it basically disappears. So what we're going to do then is we're going to come over back to the dodge and the burn tools. I'm going to select the dodge tool, which is going to allow me to brighten parts of the image. And I'm going to increase the brush size here a little bit. I've got my exposure set to 24%, range on midtones. I'm going to go ahead and paint on some light on these cliffs. Because where the sun is shining from the right, it's absolutely going to be lighting these cliffs up. And at the moment, we've got our light mostly just in the center. So I want to actually increase that over all of these cliffs like this. It's also going to, realistically, I'm just going to brighten this water a little bit as the light is kind of hitting it. And the edge of this, I guess, mini ravine. I don't know what you call this, actually. I don't know what you would call this. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the burn tool. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and get the burn tool. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to bring my my exposure right down to about 22%. I'm going to select the shadows for it as well. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint in some shadows on certain areas which I think would be affected by the light coming in from the right. So anywhere that you think there should be shadow, we're going to go ahead and paint that in now. I'm very aware, by the way. Someone mentioned about maybe not saying gonna go ahead, and I just can't stop. I just cannot stop. I've realised I've said it about 100 times. So we've gone ahead and painted that in. There we go. We've gone ahead and we've painted that in. So the light is coming from the right. I think that looks really nice. I'm really happy with this, actually. And the next thing we're going to do is just to kind of give a little bit of color from the sky in there. I am going to go ahead and make a new blank layer. I'm going to select the brush tool. I'm going to bring my flow down to about 30%, 33% is fine. I'll select a color from the sky. I'm going to change the blending mode to, let's go overlay. Let's try soft light, actually. I'm just going to paint that in on some of these bits of cliff. And you can select different colors from the sky. But this really just helps to blend in the foreground with the sky, give you some of that soft light that you get, especially if you're going for a sunset-y kind of look like this. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, and this hopefully will actually be the final part, I am going to select that bottom layer, which is the sky itself. I'm going to right click and click duplicate layer. Right, and with that, I'm going to bring that right up to the top. Select Control and T to enter the kind of transform part of this. Right click on it. I'm going to flip vertical. I'm going to move it down a little bit so that it's covering the bottom of that image. And I'm going to change the blending mode here to soft light. Now, I'm also going to select to create a layer mask again. So we've got that all in white at the moment. I'm going to click invert here. You can also do Control I to do that. So that changed it to all black for the layer mask, which means that everything is invisible. If you remember, white means you can see it, black means you can't. I'm going to come up here to the brush tool, and with white selected as the color and the layer mask selected here, I'm going to bring the flow up to 100%. I am actually going to just paint in on this bit of water. And what all that does really, it just adds a little bit. If I turn that on and off, if you watch that water, you can see it looks a bit like the reflection of the clouds in the sky. Now you can mess around with the blending modes here. Sometimes multiply will work very well. Depends on the look of the image. Sometimes overlay is the way to go. In this case, I've gone soft light. It's just a little bit more subdued. I think I'll stick with those. I'll stick with soft light. But you can mess around a little bit and see what looks best. Usually I find overlay and soft light tend to work the best. They're the most, or the least obtrusive, I'd say, into your image. I'm just going to come up here to exposure for the whole image. I'm actually going to just bring it down a little bit. And maybe get the curves in there to affect the whole image. One kind of nice tip here is that At the end of the image, if you do a couple of basic kind of edits to the whole thing with the new sky, and it can really help to blend everything together. So for example, there we go. With a little bit of a curve adjustment there, I brought the midtones down, the shadows down, and then just pop those highlights a little bit. You can see that really helps to, it really helps to bring the whole thing together. I'm really happy with how that's come out. I think that looked awesome. I think we've made a massive difference to the image. The original image was like this, and we've turned it to this. Massive, massive difference. And there's a lot of steps there, but it really gives you a sense of getting the right look and the right feel and the right kind of color balance to your photo. Now, if you have any questions, pop them down in the comments below. I'll make sure to get back to you ASAP. If you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That always helps us out. Make sure to subscribe for new content because there's new stuff all the time. Tutorials every Tuesday, reviews, all kinds of stuff. I'll see you in the next video. And, woo, as always, thanks for watching. All right, let's make this quick, boys, because I have got to... Oh no, by myself. I'm talking as if there's a crew here, but let's make this quick. Me, because I've got to edit it, and it's Tuesday afternoon. Whoo, that's not where you want to be. But it is Tutorial Tuesday. Imagine if I used that for the intro.